So welcome to this week's video newsletter. This week for me is actually last week. You may have, those who observe it may have noticed that I'm wearing the same clothes, cameras in exactly the same position. And that's because, as you're currently watching this, I'm actually on a retreat in Wales. So I'm probably doing vast amounts of self-contemplation, reflection, meditation, probably enlightened by now, hopefully enlightened by now. But this probably also means that you've got this week's email on Wednesday rather than Thursday or Friday, because Lois and Steve won't be waiting for me to do my work so they can do their work. So I hope it's come out on time this week. This week I wanted to talk very briefly about an article which has just been published on the clinic in CAM magazine, which stands for Complementary and Alternative Medicine magazine, which Nikki and I wrote together, basically partly actually as a call to action to other practitioners, to hopefully inspire them to raise their game and to look at things in a different way, but also as an article to really pull together some of the theories and some of the ways that we see, I guess actually not just ME, chronic deep fibromyalgia, Lyme disease and that kind of thing, but the whole picture of healing. So how do we see various different factors linking together? And one of these models is based on the work of Ken Wilber, who's an American philosopher, who's very famous for his basically theory of everything, which is a series of models pulling together all the different things that you could study in the world, really, from business to health, to psychology, to spirituality, to ecology, to gender studies, basically a theory that puts all of this different stuff together. And Nikki and I both came across Ken Wilber's work quite a few years ago. I actually came across him for a book he wrote called Grace and Grit, which was about his former wife's battle with cancer, the most beautifully written books I've ever come across. And I think Nikki may also have come to his work through that book. I'm an obscenely massive Ken Wilber fan, having read, I think, about 70% of his writings, which is a lot. But this model basically is a model called the 4 quadrants, the one that we used in this article, which I think is very helpful for people to reflect on and understand their own healing situations. Now, some ways it's quite complex. I'm going to try and put it very simply, and hopefully it'll make more sense when you read it in the article. But the way to think about it is basically, we can have individuals and we can have collective. So we can have us by ourselves and us in a community of other people. We also have the internal, so our own internal experience, and the external, so the world around us. And if we've therefore got individual, collective, internal, external, we can have individual, internal, external, and collective, internal and external. And if we apply that to health, for example, individual, internal would be things like looking at our psychology, looking at our emotions, looking at our belief systems, looking at the meaning we are creating around what's happening and our reasons to recover. So a lot of what we cover in the psychology department of the clinic. On the individual external, it's more things like our structural parts of our body, our nutrition, what's happening with our biochemistry, things that we can basically measure from the outside. Now, obviously, everything externally has an internal parallel, and everything internally can be measured externally in some way. We also have the collective internal, which is like our shared beliefs, our cultural values. And our cultural values have a very big impact on our healing path. Because if we're surrounded by people that don't believe don't believe there's anything wrong with us, then we find ourselves in a situation where often we start denying what's happening, or we don't accept what's happening. Having a really supportive network of people around us makes a big difference. This is one of the reasons why we put together optimumhealthcommunity.com, which is our social networking site where you can connect with other people on a healing path. The collective external is things like social policy. So, for example, the lack of funding for treatments for ME means a lot of people have a more difficult healing path because they're having to find their own resources to fund their own treatment, which is why we've obviously put together the Optimum Health Clinic Foundation to drive forward the research base so that in time, hopefully, more funding becomes available. So applying this to your own healing path, it's worth looking at. Are you aware of and looking at each of these areas? Also in the article, again, this is a complex thing that we'll talk about at some point in the future, and we'll also do a secret recovery call about it, is the 5 elements of healing, which is basically a model of 5 different stages, although they aren't quite necessarily stages that stack on top of each other, but 5 different areas that we need to again be making sure we're covering each of those. So you can read all about this in the article. I say some of the article is a little bit technical, but you can skip over those bits. But there's a lot of stuff that's in there that I really think is helpful to observe. Are we working on all the levels we could be to support our healing? Because we need to be working on all levels. You know, people will say things like, well, I'm doing homeopathy, and homeopathy treats mind, body and spirit. Well, actually, something like homeopathy works on a vibrational level which affects mind, body and spirit. Having said that, if I hit someone with a baseball bat, it will affect them from mind, body and spirit. Doesn't necessarily mean it's healing of mind, body and spirit. And you know, the mind, body, spirit things I think is a fairly crass or kind of basic way of looking at it. There's much more sophisticated ways of kind of looking at this. But making sure we're looking at and working on each area makes a really big difference. One of the things I'm convinced we're going to find with the clinical trials we're doing at the moment is people working on psychology and nutrition together recover more quickly. And if they're also looking at the other two quadrants of their community and the support around them, and they also have the right practical environment, I think that stuff together gives people the best possible chance of recovering as quickly as possible. So this is one of those video blogs I have a feeling may create more questions than it answers. But read the article and that will hopefully explain a lot more of what I'm talking about. I also wanted to put out an invitation that in these video blogs I'm really happy to cover topics that people would like me to talk about. So if you've got any questions of things you'd like me to cover or any suggestions, then why don't you post a comment underneath this video blog. So on freedomfromme.co.uk/blog, which is probably where you're watching this now anyway, post a comment with questions, or go to optimumhealthcommunity.com and we'll put a section in there for questions, and then I'll look through those and I'm really happy to cover those in the future. Thanks for watching. I look forward to speaking with you again next week.